Welcome to Drinks in the Library, the only library where drinks aren't just allowed, they are required. I'm your librarian host, Gigi Howard, and each episode I'll be interviewing a guest about a much-loved book that we will be pairing with a drink for you to enjoy along with us or consider for your next book club meetup. As always, stay curious and support your local library. Welcome back, Libration Nation. All right, this week's book is the memoir Solito by poet Javier Zamora. It's his account of the harrowing and heartfelt journey he took as a 9-year-old traveling from El Salvador to the United States to be reunited with his parents. It's deeply emotional. The storytelling is so vivid, you feel that you are in the moment, and he really captures the hope and fear and resilience of migration through a child's eyes. All right, my guest this week is Donna McCarthy. Donna is a retired high school special education teacher. She's been happily retired for 7 years. She volunteers as a friend of the Newburgh Free Library in New York and leads a book club for fellow retired teachers. Donna loves spending time with her grandson. She's a proud bi-coastal grandma, and she often is traveling to visit him in California from her home in New York. She also never passes up a chance to travel, whether it's exploring somewhere new in the U.S. or heading abroad. Also, I have buried the lead here. She is also my aunt. Really fun conversation. It's always great when we get to spend time together. Our drink this week is horchata. It is well known in Central America. It is a rice-based drink. Also, Javier drinks it in the book. I link in the show notes to an authentic recipe from El Salvador, but you can also get a pre-made mix. I also found that if you have a local pollo comparo, they have it there too. So lots of options. Before we get started, on October 28th, I am hosting a live event at the M.M. LaFleur location in Georgetown, partnering with Old Town Books there. I'm super duper excited. I have details that are almost ready to be shared, and as soon as I do, I will be linking them wherever you can find me on the internet. If you are in that area, please come. It would make my night to see you. I will be interviewing the owner of Old Town Books, Allie Kirkpatrick, and I'm just so excited about it. It's going to be a blast, and I hope to see you there. All right, let's get to it. Okay, here we are. It's my third bi-coastal podcast interview, and the first one, Aunt Donna, was with your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So where are you?
Ironically, I am at my daughter's house in California.
Mm-hmm.
I am here trying to help out babysit for my grandson. So yes, I am bi-coastal for today.
How long are you there? Just curious.
I'm going to be there till next Tuesday, another week.
Mm.
Just got here yesterday.
So fun with baby Owen. He is 9 months now.
He'll be eight months next week.
Oh, he's adorable. I'm so happy for y'all. I
One of
know.
the fun things about being with him is that I get to read him stories in person.
Yes. What are his favorite books?
He actually seems to like animal books. Yeah, so that's been a lot of fun to be able to actually read to him in person is very, very meaningful.
Oh, I love that. Warms my librarian heart, of course, to hear that. So I was really excited. I asked you, my aunt, my wonderful Aunt Donna, if you would come and be on the podcast, and you said yes. You are a huge reader and library supporter, which we will get to. And you picked the book Solito by Javier Zamora. And I wanted to ask you, so who were you when you first picked this book up?
Because this book came out only a few years ago, I can't say that I'm vastly different than that person. What prompted me to read this book, first of all, I know one of the things you like to talk about is what genres you like to read, and I do love memoirs. So that caught my eye. But secondly, I had read American Dirt, which, even though it's fiction, I found to be very powerful. So in reading this, I felt that since immigration, migration is such a big topic a few years ago, and obviously much more now, um, that was one of the reasons I felt a pull to read this book.
Yeah.
And one of my family members is from El Salvador. He's around the same age as Javier. And thankfully, he did not have the journey that Javier did. But obviously, this struck a chord in me personally.
Yeah, I agree. It's such an important story, and this one is coming from El Salvador, but clearly immigration is immigration to the United States is a big topic right now from many different countries, for sure. And I wanted to ask, I guess just kind of diving into Javier's immigration story and what prompted all of this.
So, Javier, when he was a year old, his dad migrated to the United States because of the El Salvadorian Civil War. And his mom followed a few years later. So, Javier was left in the care of his grandparents and family. His mom and dad ended up settling in Los Angeles, but their ultimate goal always was to bring him to the United States. So they sent money to his grandfather, who was knew of a coyote that would take him. And what makes Javier's story a little bit unusual is that nobody from his family in El Salvador went with him. So his grandfather, when this journey starts, the grandfather brings him to Guatemala, which is where the journey is going to start. And he stays with him until the trip is going to be officially begun. And the grandfather asks the other people in the group who are also migrating, goes around and looks all of them in the eye and says to them, "You are my grandson's family, and I'm trusting that you're going to take care of him." So as the story unfolds, there are certain people that truly do take that role very seriously, and really they become a makeshift little family. So that's kind of the beginning of the story,
Mhm.
and how the grandfather wanted to make sure he was protected in as much as you possibly could. It also shows how desperate his family was to get him reunited with his parents, that they were willing to take a chance and send him on a journey that was supposed to take 2 weeks, and it ended up taking 9 weeks,
Mm.
and traveled 4,000 miles.
Wow. Also, so a couple things that go to the beginning of the story. You mentioned a coyote. What is that?
Jody is somebody who's paid to basically smuggle migrants into the United States across the border.
Hmm.
And in this particular story, the grandfather is understandably under the impression that one particular coyote is going to be with them for the whole trip, and that didn't happen. This particular coyote left them early in the journey, and as the journey transpires, which kind of explained part of the reason why it took 9 weeks, there were actually quite a few different coyotes that followed this group and led them eventually to the United States.
And also, just going back to his life in El Salvador, what was he leaving behind that, what is life like there? I think sometimes the reality of that is just something that Americans can't really wrap their minds around.
That's a good question. Javier, he lived in a very loving family. His grandfather was definitely stern, but loving in his way. So he had his two grandparents, and he had a cousin, Molly, who he lived with. And then he had other extended family. They obviously did not have a lot of money. They did not have a telephone. So anytime Javier's mom or dad tried to call him, they would call the local bakery. And then somebody from the bakery would run to Javier's house and tell the grandfather there's a phone call. And that's how they communicated with everybody,
Yeah.
was bakery landline. He went to school. It was a Catholic school. And one of the things that was, I guess, something that I wanted to emphasize about Javier as a little 9-year-old was he went to this Catholic school, and he, at some point, is told by the grandfather that he's going to be going to the United States. And even as a little 9-year-old, he's sworn to secrecy. He can't tell anybody that this is what's happening. So they tell the nuns that he's going on a trip because he missed this big field trip with the school the year before, and now the grandfather wants to take him. Little Javier is thinking, what are people going to think when my grandfather's telling them I'm going to be gone a week? What happens after that week?
Mm,
People going to notice that I'm gone? And are they going to be upset that I didn't tell my friends what was going on?
mhm.
So it kind of tells you a little bit about what he was like as a little boy there. And he definitely was loved. And you could tell, like, he had really good interactions with his family. And he was just kind of an average little 9-year-old boy.
Yeah, and I mean, I can imagine the pressure to put on a 9-year-old. You're gonna go on this trip. You can't tell anybody. You're just gonna disappear, and your friends are gonna be like, "Where'd he go?"
Exactly. And something that I wanted to bring up was, again, about the fact that this was a little boy who didn't even know how to tie his shoes
Mm,
when he left. And the other thing was his grandfather had to drill him on all the cities that he was going to have to, or towns that he was going to be stopping in this journey,
mm,
because it was important for Javier to portray himself as a Mexican, as well as everyone else on this trip. So they had to know all these little towns. And the other thing was he had to know, even though El Salvadorians speak Spanish as well as Mexicans, as we all know, every country has its unique dialect. He and the other migrants had to learn certain words so that it didn't give them away that they weren't Mexican. So this little boy who can't tie his shoes, hasn't seen his parents in years, is separated from the family that really loves him, now has the pressure of migrating, but also I have to know every town that I'm in, what the name of that town is. And I have to know, obviously he had a different, like they might have given him a different birth date, or, and then, like I said, certain vocabulary words, they would say, you have to say it this way. You can't say it this way, because if you say it that way, they're going to know you're from El Salvador. So I can't even wrap my brain around the pressure that he had. And one of the things that I loved about this book is Javier truly shines this lens of, I'm looking at this through a 9-year-old's lens. It's not me as an adult reflecting back to what happened. You feel like you're in the head of a little 9-year-old when you're on this journey with him.
mhm. And talking about that too, because I think that's one of the really magical things about this story is the way that he tells it through that perspective. Do you want to share any particular examples that kind of illuminate the fact that he is a child?
One of the ones, like I said, was about him not being able to tie his shoes. And he had two pairs of shoes, and one of them was becoming uncomfortable. He wanted to wear the other pair, but he knew, I can't put these on because I can't tie them. And he was too embarrassed to ask somebody, and he also didn't want to be judged by the adults. So one of the characters, who I'll go into further in a few minutes, Chino, Chino's only about 18 or 19, and he truly becomes Javier's big brother.
Mm.
Javier is comfortable enough to ask him, can you please tie my shoes for me? So that was such an example of the trust that this little boy had with this older adolescent. And one of the things, a lot of times when they were on this journey and they went through the desert, they went through a mountain area. It was just really taxing. Javier would sometimes see himself as like an explorer, and that what he saw was a tree, could look like a dinosaur. And he knew who Jacques Cousteau was. And
Oh.
he referred to himself as Javier, Javier Cousteau. So that, like his imagination, you could see him putting together like little things like that a little kid would do to see things through like animals or things that aren't really there, but kind of makes reality a little less daunting. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things he said this is when he literally was at the end of his journey. So now they finally this is the true last leg of the journey. And all these people are literally like layers inside a truck. So when they finally arrive in Tucson, which is where they end up, he says, quote, "We look like a matchbox, a human cake. I'm the cherry on top, the smallest one riding on the carpet. I'm Aladdin. I finally made it through the desert." So
Mm.
that kind of gives you an example of how his little mind is viewing this whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
Actually able to say, instead of me being layered people on top of people, and he was on the top because obviously he was small, he sees himself as I'm like the cherry on top of a cake, or I'm Aladdin flying on the magic carpet. So he really did have a vivid imagination, which I'm sure served him well.
And I know they said at the beginning of the book that he was like the smartest kid in his class too. So I think, yeah, he's a very just precocious, smart little boy and just out there being put in a crazy situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And as you get further in the book, it like I said, it's just so interesting to be able to see it through a 9-year-old's eyes, and you're like, wow, how the heck did he do this?
I
Uh,
know. I know. You know, my daughter is just 10 right now, so I've been thinking a lot about that as what would that be like? I can't imagine it, but obviously it happens. And you started talking about the characters, so that is, I think, going to be so interesting for people to hear about. Who are these cast of characters, and who did you fall in love with?
So they start out with a fairly, I can't, forgive me for not, I don't remember the exact size of the group, but there was a man in the group named Chele, and he came from the same town as Javier. Not, but Javier did not know him, nor did Chele know him. When the grandfather is spending time with Javier, waiting for this trip to start, he the grandfather kind of depends on Chele because they came from the same town, that he was going to be the one that would watch out for Javier. And that's exactly the opposite of what happened. Chele was kind of an angry, not very friendly type of person. He wasn't mean to Javier necessarily, but by by certainly no stretch of the imagination could you say he was a nurturing person.
Mm.
So everybody was nice to Javier, but as the story unfolds in this little group, there's only two children, Javier and a little girl named Carla. And Carla's mom is named Patricia. And Javier feels a little connection to her because his mother's name was Patty. So he feels like this is, almost like a good sign, or the grandfather might have even thought that. So the three characters that play such a big role in the story are Chino, who's only 18 or 19, Patricia, who comes from the same town as Chino, but again, they don't know each other before that. And Carla is 12. Her mom, Patricia, is only about 27.
Mm.
And then it's kind of cute as the story goes on, and he and Javier spends more time with Carla. He develops a little crush on her. But anyway, as the book unfolds, again, they go through so many horrible things that weren't supposed to happen. Again, they were supposed to make it in 2 weeks and it was 9. They ended up on a boat. They were on in buses. They were walking for thousands of miles. So Patricia was very maternal, and she really took Javier under her wing like this is like my son. And she took very good care of him, was very watchful for him, protective of him, would always make sure like she didn't treat him really much differently than she treated Carla, who was her actual biological daughter. And Chino, I found to be more extraordinary because in my head, it's funny, in the earlier part of the book, I didn't realize how old he was. So in my head, I had this vision of, oh, he's probably like in his 20s or 30s. And then I find out he's 19. And
Wow.
I'm like, my God, he's a kid himself, really. And he talks about that he had a little brother, and he sees Javier as that little extension of that little brother. And he's the one that Javier trusts to tie his shoes. And when they get to these certain areas where it really is dangerous and they're trying to run and trying to hide, he always takes Javier by the hand and lifts him over fences or under fences. He does the same thing really he's very protective of Carla and Patricia as well.
Mm.
It's one point where yet another coyote is taking them, and he kind of assigns them roles, and he tells Patricia and Chino that they're going to be like a family, a couple. And Javier says, I was glad that he said that because it gave me an excuse to hold Chino's hand. So, like, he didn't look like,
Oh.
oh, what's this little 9-year-old holding? Why does he have to hold anybody's hand? So he felt like it's okay for me to do this because we're supposed to be a family.
Mm.
So that to me played such a huge part of the story that they really, up and literally until they went to that final house in Tucson, when they're now waiting for everybody to be picked up. As it turned out, Chino and Patricia and Carla are all migrating from Tucson. They're going to Virginia. So,
Oh, maybe they're
so
here.
and Carla are still in Virginia.
Oh.
Little Javier was going to LA, so he was
Mhm.
going obviously totally opposite part of the country. But they were going to try to stay in touch. And they did apparently stay in touch. At the end of the book, it does tell you that they did have minimal contact. It's just hard. So they did lose contact eventually. But one of the good things in looking more into Javier Zamora later, I found out that Carla DM'd him, and they are going to make arrangements for Patricia, Carla, and Javier to see each other again.
Wow. I wonder how they feel about being depicted in this story.
That's a really good question because he wrote this story for them. He really felt like he was trying to do justice to what they did for him. As an adult, he was able to really appreciate what they did. Like actually in the acknowledgments, the last line he says, and to Chino, Patricia, and Carla, wherever you are, I owe you my life. I carry you with me.
Oh.
He, he truly felt that these were people that were just you know, always going to be a part of their life, his life, even if he didn't see them. And Chino, when I was taught that they ended up, well, in Virginia, was kind of sad. He ended up, because there were so many gangs in El Salvador, one of the gangs, I guess, found where he was, and Javier doesn't know. Did he end up back in El Salvador? What exactly happened to him? But one of the things that I wanted to mention is that Javier Zamora, as an adult, is an accomplished poet who has won many, many awards. He's been the recipient of a fellowship. He wrote a book that is called Unaccompanied. And in that book, he wrote a poem about Chino. And if it'd be okay, I will read just an excerpt.
Yeah, I would love that. We'll read it.
So it's called Second Attempt Crossing, and underneath that it says for Chino. So I'm just gonna kind of jump into the middle, and it really does describe how Chino was with him throughout this horrendous journey that they took. You spirited back toward me. I jumped on your shoulders, and we ran from the white trucks and then their guns. I said, freeze, Chino, para por favor. So I wouldn't touch the legs that kicked you. You pushed me under your chest, and I never thanked you. Beautiful Chino, the only name I know to call you by. Farewell, your tattooed chest, the M and the S and the 13. Farewell, the phone number you gave me when you went east to Virginia, and I went west to San Francisco. You called twice a month. Then your cousin said the gang you ran from in San Salvador found you in Alexandria. Farewell, your brown arms that shielded me then, that shield me now from La Migra, which is means the Border Patrol. So that I found that very touching and very powerful.
Yeah.
Even now, like when you think about it, he hasn't had any contact with Chino since, like I said, for a limited time after they arrived in the States. And to think that now he's let's see, 32 years old,
Mm-hmm.
he still has this powerful connection to Chino, even though he has no way to communicate with him and he doesn't know what happened to him. And I think that was the most profound feeling that I took from this story, that somebody who started off as a total stranger to him ended up, as he said, you saved my life, and as well as not to undermine Patricia's role,
Mm-hmm.
but he was like the big brother slash father figure that he desperately needed on this horrible journey.
Mm. I teared up when you read that. Yeah, it was very moving.
It's very emotional.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you said Javier wrote the story as a connection or thank you to his companions on the trip. What other, or if there are any other messages that you think he's hoping the reader will take with them?
I think that it's so important to be resilient, to persevere, because if anybody in that group had given up, they would have been putting their lives in danger. And anything the coyotes said that they did. So obviously, being with all these adults and how they handled it had a big impact on him as he was growing up. And that, I will say this. I know that I've listened to a little bit about him since then, and he is really very, very concerned with people that are migrants right now. And I know that, like he said, that the journey that he had truly wasn't lost on him, even though it was horrific and traumatic. It was a gift that he actually got to the US and was rejoined to his parents.
Hmm.
Did I answer that okay? Or
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's just making me think of the beginning where he's talking about having dreams of just wanting to lay in bed with his parents, even his father, who he's never met before. That is his ultimate dream is to be reunited with them. And what a child's dream. That is a dream of a child who's not over their parents yet.
parents, I really didn't talk much about them, but they really did work hard at keeping in touch with him. As I said to you, they would call the bakery so that they could talk to him, and they sent him a lot of things so he knew this is what my life in America might look like. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, some of it was based on his little 9-year-old, everything, as any kid, whatever you see on TV. But suggestion. Like he talked about like having an air conditioner and a pool and all the little creature comforts. But he really, he knew that his parents loved him and he didn't ever feel like they abandoned me. He, you said he really didn't know his father. He was a baby when he left, but he did have a lot of memories of his mom before she left.
Yeah.
So there was that big draw to I want to be where my parents are.
Yeah. I think it's time here because you picked our drink for
Mhm.
this episode, and it's a great connection. I wanted you to be able to tell that side of it. And what are we drinking?
So the drink, I actually called my son-in-law who comes from El Salvador. So I said, can you mention, give me some suggestions. I said they don't have to be alcoholic. And he mentioned horchata. And I had heard of it, but I really had no idea what it was. And I looked at the recipe, and it's a little daunting. It's not like something you're just going to knock off when a bunch of friends come. I'll admit, disclosure, I actually said to you, Gigi, Starbucks sells a version of horchata in the summer. So I'm thinking of maybe going to get that. And then you mentioned this brand of horchata that came in a little bag. That's what I love, shortcuts. So anyway, to keep it honest, what real horchata is, really it's a rice drink. It's usually served in the summer, so it's a cold, refreshing drink, which is why at Starbucks it's like a seasonal drink. But rice is the basis of the drink. And so you have to cook rice, or no, you don't even cook rice, you just rinse it, you blend it, and some of the ingredients are, after everything's blended, is the rice water, really, the water from the rice, almonds, cinnamon, and then evaporated milk. That's a big one. We gotta love our sweet stuff.
Yeah.
And whole milk and vanilla extract.
Mm.
And it really is, it's a delicious drink. It's served over ice. And I actually went recently to a Mexican restaurant and it was on the menu. So I ordered it. And
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to ask the waitress what the ingredients are to see if this is like really legit. And she told me, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty much what I looked up, that, that's what was in it. So it was really a very good drink. You can really taste the cinnamon. And to say, I don't know if you'd necessarily taste that it's rice water, but all the flavors meld together and it's a nice drink. And in the book Solito, apparently, actually, this was kind of funny. I saw an interview with Javier Zamora, and he said sometimes it's like a competition whose horchata is better, Mexican or El Salvadoran.
Oh,
It's more common that that I guess that I don't know if the Mexican recipe is different from the El Salvadoran. However, in the book, it sounds like I don't know if Javier had ever had horchata, but he did have it when they were in Mexico, and he liked it.
yeah. It's very like sweet and creamy and like you said, like a fun kind of refreshing summer drink. So I love that you brought that to me and we have a few different options. So I'll put in the show notes like the actual recipe for the
if you really want to be brave and make it yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And then I'll also put a link to the premix that you can buy on Amazon, which is what I'll make.
And of horchata.
Yes, yes. Oh, it's so fun. Coming back to the story a little bit, I guess the question to ask now is just, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure we touched on with the book?
I think after reading the book, it prompted me to want to know more about Javier Zamora as an adult. So that's kind of what the book did for me because I was like, what happened to him? I mean, I knew yes, I know he became an accomplished poet, but I wanted to know a little bit more. And I was able to find things like interviews when he was like trying to encourage people to read his poetry book unaccompanied, as well as Solito. He, did guest peer spots in bookstores, and I found a link to the New York Times that showed an interview with him. And that's where I found out where he was going to be reconnected, hopefully, with Patricia and Carla. I would say the biggest thing that the book impacted me was, first of all, the incredible survival instincts of people when they're trying to get away from a situation where they know that there's no hope for them.
Mm,
And that if they can get to a place where they see as a safe haven, they'll do anything to do that. And just listening to the whole journey was very, very powerful, and how people banded together to try to see that to fruition.
yeah. I, like I said earlier, I just think it's hard for us to understand the amount of violence and fear and, like you said, lack of hope that is, if people feel like they don't have a choice, if they're not going to survive if they don't try to come to a place like the United States. And that, I think the story definitely makes that very clear.
Yes. Just a little add on. I did find out again in doing a little bit of investigating after I finished the book. Javier is a legal resident of the United States now. And part of the his finishing up his green card process involved him having to go back to El Salvador to the American embassy. And that was the first time he had been there since he had left at 9. And I think he went back, let's see, he's 30. He was somewhere in his late 20s. So it
Okay.
was not that long ago. And his grandparents are both still alive, or were at that point. So he was able to visit them.
Good. They were very loving. I'm sure they were glad to see him. I mean, and how hard can you imagine does that have to be to send this precious child that you love and you don't have any hope that you'll ever see them again?
That's right. I mean, some of his, like the cousin that he lives with, Molly, some of his cousins, as well as her, they did actually also migrate to the United States. And I believe they might be also in California as well. But the grandparents, he realized were not going to be able to come to the States.
Mm. Oh, it's heartbreaking to imagine. I'm happy his story is ended so well.
I'll say one quick thing
Yeah.
that in this book, I'm glad you said that. I found this book sometimes, and I rarely have feel this feeling with a book, where I was reading about some perilous part of the story, and I actually had to put the book down and say, oh my gosh, I have to take a step back. I'm so anxious about what's going to happen. And then I would have to say to myself, Donna, he lives to see the end of the story. He gets out because he's a poet. And that's one of the reasons I was able to keep reading it, because I knew there was a quote unquote happy ending, because sometimes it was gut wrenching, and I really did have to take a step back. So it was powerful. It's not certainly not a light read, as you can tell already, but well worth the journey if you want to become a little bit more educated about what it takes to be a migrant trying to look for a better life.
Yeah. I have to tell you, I co-lead my neighborhood book club, but I'm, as the librarian, usually the one that picks out the books. And they sometimes, a lot of them listen to this. I love you guys. But the first thing I heard was, oh my gosh, Gigi, this one is so long. But now, as they're reading it, it's our pick for later this month. I've heard a lot of like the story is amazing, and I'm really glad that we're reading it. So I think, yeah, it's popular with my book club too.
So happy.
Yes, yay! And I guess on that same note, I mean, we probably already touched on it, but recommending this for who would you recommend it for?
I would really recommend it for obviously not young kids, but adolescents definitely. And anybody like above adolescence. Again, because I feel like it's an eye-opening experience because some people aren't necessarily tolerant of migrants. And I think this is a great opportunity for anybody to truly understand the ramifications of having to try to escape your country for a better life. So that
Yeah,
it's kind of a broad range of who might benefit from this.
yeah. I agree. Yeah, 100%. And I wanted to take some time to talk about you and your love of reading and libraries and tell us about that experience.
I've been a ferocious reader since I was a little kid. So I've always had an intense love affair with books and go to the library. But I was as a young mother, wanted to immediately immerse my children into the whole library experience. So my oldest son is now, he just turned 37. So at about 36 years ago,
Hmm.
started going to the children's section of the library.
Hmm.
It's also that I ended up making lifelong friends that I'm still friends with because we went to the children's program together. And that was a huge gift to me. And then you fast forward a million years to when I retired, which was 6 or 7 years ago. I've lost track. But so I was always thinking, gee, what am I going to do with myself now that I'm retired? And I saw at a big event that they were looking for friends for the Newburgh Library. And I went and joined. So I now have been a friend of the library for 3 years, a little more than 3 years. And now I am the co-chairperson of the Friends. So we promote our backdoor bookstore. And what we really do is the library asks us for money that's not in the budget. As again, preaching to the choir here. That, we have this community event coming, we have this coming up, can you give us X amount of dollars? So our book events, which are once a month at the bookstore, all that money goes into all these programs that we try to promote to our community. And the community where my library is located, there are a lot of people that are lower income, and a lot of them can't go and just buy books. So they do use the library, but we give away a lot of free books, donated books.
Hmm.
We're very particular about making sure the books are in great shape so that children and adults, there's nothing like having possession of your own book. So to make sure that they're in good condition is important so that kids see the value in that. I absolutely love working at the book events and working at the community events and just promoting reading for, children, adults. I can't say enough about libraries, and I can't tell you how exciting it is to have a niece who's a librarian. And, and I tell everybody about your podcast that
Oh,
I'm surrounded by readers. I also am part of a retired teachers book club, and I facilitate that. And I'm always telling everybody, oh, you have to check out my niece's podcast. I love books, and I wish I lived closer to you because I would be hanging out at your library all the time. You'd have
oh.
to
Well, thank you so much. I also wanted to mention, since you brought up friends, anybody who's listening to this, you probably have a friends group of your local public library that you can support through membership, or Donna, like you mentioned, donations, or even like you are doing, actually participating in the events and going to meetings and things like that. So it is a great benefit to public libraries. And I know academic libraries have them as well, but I'm very familiar with the public side of it.
Yes, exactly. And yes, I can't say enough about supporting your libraries.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a rough few years recently, and we don't have to go into it. But yes, call your local legislator and tell them, when I mean local, I mean honestly like your county board of supervisors, because half the time they're hearing complaints from people complaining about things about the library, but they're not hearing the vast majority of people who love the library and are just so grateful to have it. So
I'm glad you said that because that will make me do that as well. Little public service announcement.
yeah, yeah. It's not hard to do, and I think like it's positive feedback. I think a lot of the your local leaders would love to hear that you love the local libraries. Anyhow, Aunt Donna, thank you so much for doing this with me today. It's been a pleasure and a delight to talk with you.
It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Good. Don't say you liked it too much because then I'll have you on again.
A lot of books, so
Good. Well, hey, you're the second McCarthy. Oh, no, you're the third McCarthy because my mom's been on too. So,
your mom's the pioneer.
yes.
We're gonna have to recruit some
Yeah,
more.
absolutely. Okay, this has been so fun and thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me, Gigi.
Thank you for spending some time with me and my guest for an episode of Drinks in the Library. For more information about the show, you can find us on Instagram at Drinks in the Library, on the World Wide Web, drinksinthelibrary.com, or shoot me an email at drinkspod@gmail.com. Until next time, cheers.